Hello, I'm Rick Wade, Senior Vice President for Strategic Alliances and Outreach at the United States Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today for Equality of Opportunity in Action, Accelerating Board Diversity. A couple of years ago, the United States Chamber of Commerce partnered with the National Association of Corporate Directors to accelerate diversity in America's corporate boardrooms, identifying, preparing, and connecting Black and other executives of color to prepare them for board service. Here's the deal. We know that the importance of diversity to our nation's prosperity and competitiveness is a priority. Diversity is not just the right thing to do, it's good for business. Research and data shows that executive teams and companies, including boards that are more diverse, lead companies in directions that make them more innovative, that make them more profitable, building better and healthier places for workplace culture and better business outcomes. So this conversation today is extremely important. Through this event, we'll discuss the goals that we've achieved. Yes, we've made progress, but there's still more work to be done. We'll talk about the current landscape of corporate boards and diversity. We'll hear from speakers who will share best practices on strategies to achieve a diverse and inclusive board and to advance board diversity across our country. So why don't we jump right in? Let me introduce Marcel Bouchicou, who is the Senior Director for Credentialing and Engagement at the National Association of Corporate Directors, who will bring up our first panel. Marcel, we'll turn it over to you.
Rick, thanks so much. You're doing great work at the Chamber through the Equality of Opportunity Initiative. Really enjoy and value partnering with you on this program and your broader work. So thanks for that introduction and thanks for having us back for this Equality of Opportunity in Action webinar. My name is Marcel Bouchicou. I'm the Senior Director of Credentialing and Strategic Engagement with NACD. NACD is a business membership organization with over 23,000 corporate directors. We are the director association for board members, and we're delighted to have the chance to be with all of you today for what I think will be a very important discussion. My colleague Tracy G, our Chief People Officer at NACD, was supposed to be leading today's discussion. Unfortunately, travel got in the way of her being here, so I'm fortunate to be able to step into this discussion. I will do my best to make it a productive one. Luckily, I have a great panel with me today who we'll meet. We're going to jump right into the conversation there. As Rick shared, we all know how critical diversity is to American business, not just at the workforce level, but also at the board level. That's been a priority for many, many years for corporate boards and for directors. And, you know, a lot of the recent discussion has been framed in the context of these last couple of years, the murder of George Floyd, the pandemic, and so on. But this is part of a broader and bigger discussion, a movement, the growth of our country and of our businesses. And that's one reason I'm really delighted to be joined by our panelists today. Key to what we're going to discuss today is not just talk about why board diversity is important and how it should happen. We're going to talk and hear about an example of one organization, Santa Clara University, one of many, that has really put some, what I'm going to say is innovative action here to really help move us forward in this critical area. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from the panel today, and I'm going to ask them to come on as I just finish my opening remarks to share that the Santa Clara work, the Black Corporate Board Readiness program that we're going to hear about and look at in more detail and learn from today is one example of many great efforts that are going on across the country in academic institutions, in corporate settings, other not-for-profits, other innovative companies that are trying to make these connections And so part of what we want to discuss today is what that landscape looks like and what those options are that exist out there, both from the individual that might be thinking about a future board career, but also for the board members watching that are trying to figure out how to connect with these organizations and, most importantly, connect with these individuals. At NACD, we're running NACD Accelerate, and we've been fortunate that, as Rick shared, the Chamber, through the Equality of Opportunity Initiative, has been a partner there. We have over 700 participants in that program, growing every day. So there's a lot of energy on this topic from both the individual side and from the corporate side. And with that, I'd like to bring in our panel so we can get to start and really hear from others that are doing it. I'm joined today by Sue Siegel. Sue is a board member of Illumina, Align Technology, Nevro, the Kaiser Family Foundation, and The Engine. She's a lecturer at MIT, has held leadership positions at GE. I could go on and on and on. She is also a mentor with the Santa Clara Black Corporate Board Readiness program. So, Sue, thanks for being here. We're also joined by Cynthia Burks. Cynthia is a board member, advisor, and investor. She recently stepped down after a long tenure as part of the leadership team as CHRO of Genentech. Cynthia is a Black Corporate Board Readiness alumni. And Cynthia, I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'll let maybe Dennis take some credit for the news that's out there, but look forward to hearing more about that. And then finally, Dennis Lanham. Dennis is the Senior Assistant Dean of Executive Education, the Executive Director of the Silicon Valley Executive Center, and a co-founder of the Black Corporate Board Readiness Program at Santa Clara University. So Cynthia, Sue, Dennis, delighted you could be with us today. Really look forward to our discussion because as I tried to tee up, there's lots of great work going on in this space right now. I think you all have experience with and have helped design, lead, shape one of the, I'm going to call it, from my perspective, more successful programs out there right now. So really look forward to hearing from you about what works, where the innovation is. But before we get into that, I might ask for just a quick introduction. And Cynthia, perhaps I'll start with you, where you're coming from, how you're approaching today's discussion.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much. It's really wonderful to be here with everyone, and I'm also looking forward to a great conversation. Maybe just to round out a few details about my background. So I'm currently a board member, consultant, and advisor. I'm an independent board member for Torch, and Torch is a learning and development platform. I'm also a board member for a family-owned company, which is in the sustainable paper products industry. And just announced, I have been nominated to join the board of the public company WD-40, and that will be confirmed in the fall. And prior to that, you know, as already mentioned, I've spent my career really in human resources, most recently as the head of people and culture for Genentech, which is part of Roche Pharmaceuticals. And so as I think about this topic, I really look at it through the lens of both a new board member and going through that journey, but also as someone that has been in the human capital space, where I have focused a lot of my efforts and work on making sure that individuals had opportunities, but also that organizations were selecting the most qualified people for roles. And so I look at this topic really from my expertise, but also from a personal standpoint.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Cynthia. Sue, can I turn to you next?
Sure. First of all, thank you to the NACD, Marcel, your leadership in bringing this together with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I think this topic is so important in terms of being able to address the face of corporate governance, and it's timely to have this type of discussion. So thank you very much for actually inviting me to participate. My background, I think you heard already a little bit of it. I currently serve as a board member on several public companies. I chair MIT The Engine, and I also serve as a trustee at the Kaiser Family Foundation, now known as KFF. I've served on many different boards over my career. I've had the opportunity to be, as a trained scientist, molecular biologist, biochemist, actually do a number of operating roles, including leading a public company, being a venture capitalist, and having most recently been Chief Innovation Officer for General Electric. So I've come to this conversation very much with the board perspective in mind, and doing it with a view, particularly sitting on non-gov and being a chairman of a board, and really believing in what diversity can do with regards to bringing the appropriate perspectives, the appropriate skill sets to the modern board. And I hope very much to be able to share some of those thinkings as we get into the conversation.
Thank you, Sue. And last but certainly not least, Dennis, can you give us your quick background, and we'll then jump into the conversation?
Sure, happy to. So I share the thank you that the other panelists have shared for bringing this conversation to the forefront. So kudos to U.S. Chamber of Commerce and NACD, and a great pleasure to be here and to help hopefully add some insights to the conversation today. My name is Dennis Lanham. I am the Senior Assistant Dean of Exec Ed at Santa Clara and have been doing university-based executive programs for about 12 years. I've spent 5.5 of those now at Santa Clara in the Silicon Valley, retooling the portfolio and adding new programs and innovating in a way where we are still helping executives grapple with the major thing they're dealing with today, DEIJ, ESG, and many other things, but doing it in a way that I believe speaks to who we are as an Ignatian-based Catholic Jesuit university. And so, for instance, with our board programs, we're not measuring our success just on enrollment and revenue generation. We're measuring placement. We want to make sure that the work that we're doing has an impact. And on a personal note, I've been doing work in social justice initiatives since I was a child, having been born and raised in Dallas, Texas, specifically racial justice. And so being the Dean of Exec Ed at Santa Clara has offered an opportunity to bring that personal passion to my professional life. And I'm excited to talk with you all today.
That's wonderful. Thank you all. So we're going to get into our discussion now. I want to encourage our attendees, those listening in, to please submit questions throughout. We have some time carved out at the end, but as questions come in, I know that Dennis, Sue, and Cynthia are happy to take them in real time, and we'll try to make that happen. So again, please submit your questions as you have them. Let's start at the top here. I mean, we talked early on in this discussion just a few seconds ago about all of the good initiatives out there. I think there's a lot of innovation going on. In some ways, it can be overwhelming. I mean, Sue, I think about someone in your position that's thinking about through how you connect with potential board members, and it could probably feel like a tidal wave, right? And so there's a lot going on, lots of it very good. But how do we cut through this? How do we think about this? We want to take a deep dive here with you all. And Dennis, let me start with you, if I may. Again, you talked about having this very specific goal, this outcome of placement, right? I think a lot of people say they want that. It's a good goal. It's hard work. But can you talk about how you approach this at Santa Clara, how you develop the Black Corporate Board Readiness program, what your approach is, what the launch was like, and what the story has been to date?
Certainly, yeah. So the Corporate Board Readiness programs actually started with a program that we built to address gender diversity. So we had a women's corporate board readiness program that we launched in May of 2019. And when we were building that, I remember doing the landscape analysis and trying to learn what all was out there, because prior to that, I had not done any programming in the corporate governance space. And so learning for me was key if we were going to be successful. And our approach was a bit different because much of what was out there seemed to be very good in terms of director education or pre-director education, if you will. However, if you're going to approach programmatic thrust from an impact standpoint and really think about placement, like we talked about, I knew that we had to go beyond just a certificate experience. We had to go beyond just learning from faculty members, from peers, from corporate director experts, but we needed to think about the program design from a network perspective, because I think what we are dealing with in regard to DEI at all levels, and certainly in the boardroom, is a disconnected society. Our social tissues have historically been disconnected. And so we wanted to go as far as we could with the network approach and bring in as many networks as possible to introduce organizations and people to this incredibly talented concentration of qualified potential board candidates. And so we incorporated mentoring, which meant we had to go out and recruit a number of different corporate directors who are already in the boardroom and bring them on to do mentoring. Most of the facilitation of the modules are done by sitting corporate directors and people who have multiple boards under their belt. Some are retired, and we're talking 14 plus public company boards. And so they have lived experience. And in the case of the women's program, they were mostly women. All mentors were women. Most of the facilitators were women. And we created that safe space to have a conversation, a real conversation about gender in the boardroom. And it was coming from experienced women who have been in those shoes and who understand that experience. So it's not just sort of nuts and bolts learning, but you're getting more. And the more networks we could connect, the more likely success we would have with placement. And that carried true for the launch of our Black Corporate Board Readiness program just last year in 2021. And so we went out and were able to pull together incredible Black corporate directors who thought the model was different and they could see the potential in terms of the impact, and said yes to us. And so it's a community-based approach to solving the problem, and it lives in a university-based exec ed center. But really, network was key. So, we wanted to obliterate the myth, the floating myth out there that there's a lack of talent, qualified Black talent, qualified female talent that could sit in these corporate boardrooms. And we're seeing the impact, we're seeing the success as a result of the way we approach the program design.
Well, and that's outstanding, Dennis. And perhaps a little bit later, we'll come back to the actual design and some more of the elements. But Cynthia, if I can bring you in, you're an alumni, so you've experienced it from the other side of the table, so to speak. And as you shared, and let me extend my congratulations, perhaps preemptively, but on your nomination to the WD-40 board, a beneficiary of this outstanding program that Dennis was alluding to. So from your perspective, why did this matter, this experience this way?
Yeah, so let me spend a few minutes maybe talking about my perspective as a participant and a graduate of the program, really to help paint the picture of why programs like these are so important, and also to maybe serve as an example of talent that might be out there that organizations maybe don't know about or don't have access to. And so, let me just speak to that for a little bit. So, given the importance of people and culture to any organization, as an experienced C-suite leader and really a human capital management expert, I have knowledge and skills and experience that I think many people believe are important on a board, especially now, I would say, as we think about ESG and as we think about sort of the changing landscape on that employer-employee relationship. But I also bring additional perspectives. I bring perspectives as a woman, as a person of color. I also bring the perspective of someone that may be from a different socioeconomic background than others typically are when they serve on boards. And so these perspectives, I believe, really help inform business strategy regarding products, regarding customers, regarding employees. And we know that oftentimes these perspectives might be missing in the boardroom. So, I have qualifications that I think are useful on a board. Yes, I'm new to the board journey. I still have much to learn, but I believe I've already added value, and feedback that I've received so far support that. And I believe that with continued learning and growth and my own focus and dedication, I'll continue to grow and be an even better board member. Now, why am I sharing all of this? I'm not sharing this to be boastful. Really, on the contrary, had it not been for programs like the Santa Clara University program, the mentors that are offered, the coaches that are offered, the programming itself, I wouldn't have considered a board role. I wouldn't have thought that this type of role is a role that I could really aspire to be in. because it wasn't in my worldview growing up. And it certainly didn't seem like something that I had access to. So these types of programs both help to develop talent, but also to help talent realize, yeah, serving on a board could be something that I could be good at, and it could be an incredibly enriching and helpful experience. Now, having been in human resources for my entire career, I've witnessed over and over again how opportunities often go to people that are within someone's network. It's just our natural sort of response. I do it too. You have an opportunity, you think, okay, who do I know that might be good for this? And so programs like this, coupled with intention and focus, can really ensure that the opportunities and the access to talent is much broader. And it allows people to see what's possible for their careers, and it allows organizations to see a broader pool of talent that might be appropriate for their open board roles, and give them an opportunity to compete.
Cynthia, thank you. Sue, I'd like to bring you into the conversation now if we can, and bring that board view in. You've sat on, I'm going to guess, all the committees, but a particular interest here for us, NAMGov. What drew you to the Santa Clara program, or as you think about programs like this, how are you approaching it from that NAMGov and that sitting board member perspective?
Well, Marcel, you mentioned from the very beginning that there is an overwhelming amount of these types of programs because of the need for them. But what drew me to Santa Clara, quality. Let's be clear, quality. And the authenticity of the experience that Santa Clara University was offering, particularly through what we call the BCBR, the Black Corporate Readiness program that Cynthia and Dennis so articulately talked about. What I have found being part of the non-gov committee or having to recruit amongst the broader board is you want to find those programs that really will provide folks that are both qualified but also understand their role on the board. Now, you're going to hear a lot from both Cynthia and Dennis on potential elements of the curriculum, but I've got to mention one particular piece that the BCBR, I just think, does an outstanding job, and that is the element of, because the mentors and the advisors and the facilitators, those that actually teach the materials, are all sitting board members. One of the things that they have done above and beyond what other programs have done is they have an actual session where they ask the question amongst this very trusted cohort, what does it mean to be a Black corporate board member? And you might think, oh, well, that's easy to, I have a fiduciary responsibility, duty of loyalty, duty of care. It's not that question that you're trying to answer. It is, what is your role, particularly as we're breaking through with diversity onto boards that have not had the diversity? What is your role, being either the first or maybe the second underrepresented minority? And that intimate conversation amongst knowledgeable, practiced board members and those that are actually training is so authentic and reveals so much in terms of not just the mechanics and the technical aspects of things, but frankly, what you need in terms of character and this character of leadership to be able to have the privilege of representing a company, but also representing a population. Mm-hmm. And I found that so distinctive amongst so many different programs. And I think the cohort members, the folks that graduate from it, will tell you the same.
Sue, thank you. Dennis, let me bring you in on that, and let me sort of pick up on Sue's comment and ask you, When you were designing this program, I've got to think from the conversations we've had as we've gotten to know each other, that was a very deliberate decision to ask that question and to structure it how it is. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you were trying to achieve through the program? And then Cynthia, if you're willing to share, perhaps you can share what your experience was like. But Dennis, can you talk to about that element that Sue spoke to, this question of what does it mean to be a Black director?
Sure. So from an executive education standpoint, there are a few things that I just believe make for a good learning, specifically executive level learning. One is that you got to have peer-to-peer learning, right? So it's really important to put together cohort members that can learn from each other. And you got to create a sense of vulnerability in the classroom. And this program is completely online because of what happened with the pandemic, and so we had to be a little bit more creative about how to create an environment that would lend itself to that level of vulnerability. And then the other piece that I think makes for really good executive ed is it's not necessarily faculty models, right? Faculty models are a huge piece of value for any executive ed program, but that the storytelling, right? And so when you're being taught by someone with lived experience, either as a woman or as a Black corporate director, who perhaps have had experiences that are unlike their counterparts in that boardroom, the learning the level of learning and intimacy that comes from that can be very, very powerful for participants. And so it was critically important for us to pull in the right facilitators and mentors to do the teaching and to sort of be that support system for these board ready candidates. And so from a curriculum design standpoint, there really was 3 threads that we thought about that were important, that sort of anchor the program and the learning of the program. One is nuts and bolts, right? You're going to learn anything that you'd learn in another board readiness program. How are the committees structured? What's the time commitments? How do you navigate the dynamics in the boardroom? How do you come to a decision? What does process look like? All of those things are covered in our program. And then the other thread, which you also see often in other programs, is how is my accumulated professional value and my experience matched across the full spectrum of corporate board opportunity? Everything from startup boards to pre-IPO to your Fortune 100 boards. And how do I make sense and think about my value as a potential match across the full spectrum? So we do a deep dive there. And then the third piece, and we've already touched on this, but it's that safe space to talk about what are the additive responsibilities of being a Black board member or a female board member that your counterparts may not really have to think about. And so those are the 3 content threads and sort of the learning environment that we intended to create. And I think those are the pieces that really have created some of the magic and some of the relationships, because it's going to all boil down to relationships and our ability, again, to connect people, to connect organizations to people that they may not necessarily know, to Cynthia's point earlier. And the learning environment that we create over this 5-week experience with our cohort members, it does that. It conquers that. So
outstanding. Thank you. Thanks, Dennis. Cynthia, let me bring you back in. I don't want to put you on the spot to necessarily address the experience, the discussion that was had in the room. We want to respect that cohort experience. But as you reflect back on those conversations and you come forward to today, what has that impact been for you as an individual, as a business leader, and as a board member?
Yeah, I'm actually really happy to share because it is so impactful. This is really the magic that Dennis talked about. I mean, the programming, the content is exceptional, solid, great facilitators, great content, great speakers. But the magic really in the program is that opportunity to talk about those challenges, the experience of being the only one. Now, granted, many of us, we've experienced being the only one given the levels that we've achieved in our career. So that part isn't completely new, but being the only one in this space, I think is another element, and an opportunity. The program really provided an opportunity to talk about what might that feel like. And Sue and Dennis talked about the responsibility that may come along with being the first or being the only one. But actually, there's quite a bit of burden that comes with that as well. And there's the negotiating with yourself around, do I speak up? Do I not speak up? How do I navigate the full relationship with my fellow board members, with the CEO of the company? Do I think about the sort of winning long term, or do I put a stake in the ground on this particular issue because I have something of value to offer? So we talked a lot about how do you navigate that space, recognizing that you have an opportunity to bring a different perspective, some of the perspectives that I mentioned earlier in my comments, and there's some cost there, there's some burden, and there's some weight there. And so one of the wonderful things that came out of this program is that I feel like I have access to people that are in the same situation as I'm in, whether they're new board, just early on their board journey, or experienced board members that I can text, pick up the call, invite to coffee, have a conversation with, to talk through issues that I might face as a new board member. And so the relationships and being part of that cohort and being part of that community is something that I will also take with me, in addition to just the content around the program and what's offered there. So it really is the magic of the program.
Dennis, I think you've got your mentor for the next cohort right here. That's wonderful. Cynthia, if I can stay with you for a second, because I think that experience you talked about, and we have questions coming in, and so we'll begin to address those. But as you reflect, you've gone through this experience now. It opened up this new career path for you that you weren't thinking about before. Can I ask what that experience was like? I mean, you're obviously a great success story here, which is wonderful, but it wasn't easy for you. We know that. You don't need to go into too many details, but can you talk about some of that experience as you tried to navigate this transition to the boardroom, the networking that had to go on, the conversations, had maybe some of the barriers that exist? And then Sue, I'm going to ask you to come in and share that from the board perspective, and we'll pick up questions there, which center more around your role, I think. So Cynthia, anything you're willing to share there?
When I started my board journey, honestly, I knew nothing other than this sounds like it could be really interesting and an opportunity to leverage my business, my legal, my HR background. But I didn't have a network to go to ask questions. And certainly as the first opportunity presented itself and going through that process of interviewing, I didn't know what the process would be. I didn't know if people in these situations, do you negotiate compensation? So lots of basic questions that I didn't have answers to. And again, this program really offers the specifics around, what does the interview process look like? How do you market yourself? How do you build a board bio? How do you talk about compensation? What's reasonable to ask and at what point in the process? And it also really helped us understand the differences between companies and what that might look like in terms of board responsibilities. So that network and being able to answer questions along the way, I was really fortunate to connect to this group so that as I continued my board journey, I had resources that I could really rely on.
That's great. Thank you. Sue, we have questions coming in here that revolve around sort of the role of the board in facilitating this. And what I mean by that, right, is we can, Dennis can be as successful as he could possibly dream, right? And we could we know we've obliterated the pipeline myth, right? We know that. We know there's quality candidates. But how do boards prepare themselves? And I'm going to sort of, we talk about DEI and DEIJ. We spend a lot of time talking about the diversity piece here. We don't spend as much time talking about, if any, frankly, the inclusion, the equity, and the justice piece, particularly when it comes to in the boardroom. So how do you think about that, your role and responsibility as a director, to find the Cynthias of the world, to partner with the Dennises of the world, to then make sure that the board is really living up to its true fullest potential and frankly responsibility when you're bringing on these new board members. So how do you think about that inclusion piece and making sure that all of the work that is going on and ending up in your boardroom is successful?
Beautiful question, Marcel. So the reality of today is that there are a number of different forces that are coming to the party, be it investors, be it public exchanges, be it the world of bankers before they take somebody public, that are requiring that there be diversity on the board. And it could be gender or underrepresented minorities, right? With a big focus on gender right now, particularly women board members. That's something that's just ever present, and non-gov committees and boards in general. You know, there was a moment in time where it was driven by legislation and a law here in California. I think we all know SB 826, and of course for the underrepresented minorities, AB 979. Now, both have been stricken down. I'm convinced they will be appealed, and I believe they will be rewritten and resubmitted such that, in fact, they'll be robustly defended and they will get passed over time. And that put a pressure on non-gov committees. But the reality is that it's no longer about purely the pressure. Yes, that was the catalyst, and it certainly served its purpose by doubling the number of directors since 2018 that are now women on public boards. But I will say the following: it's still not enough. It's only 27% nationally on public boards and about 32 or 33% on California public boards. So it gives you a sense of, yes, it doubled, but it's still not enough. We're not at gender parity in any way, shape, or form. Non-gov committees are doing a number of things with regards to understanding our role and boards in general. That is not only at the board level, but also making sure at the operating executive level. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. At the board level, we're ensuring that we understand what are the quality sources of these types of candidates, like Cynthia, for example, that we can go after to really build our boards, diverse boards, but very talented boards. I think nominating and gov committees today are really understanding that it can't just be about looking at a CEO or a CFO. You must look beyond those positions, because now between ESG and the notion of, you know, cybersecurity, the whole element around talent because of the Great Resignation, Cynthia becomes extraordinarily attractive. And therefore, we're going to go out and look for first-time board members, very qualified with very specific skill sets. So we're going to build it around a board matrix, which really healthy boards and good boards do, to understand what the goals of a company are and strategically match the people that we're recruiting into board seats that might be available. So our responsibility is really to ensure that we're building up this whole area of diversity and underrepresented minorities in the boardroom. But I wanted to say one thing, and then I'll stop, and that is boards also can work with the CEO to ensure that there are policies with regards and training and development with regards to the sitting executives in the companies, to encourage training for boardship, to encourage policies that really delineate how many boards you might be able to sit on and what kind of boards can you sit on. It really raises the awareness and continues to build up that pipeline of folks that are beyond the CFO and the CEO, and increase the diversity pool that we might be able to pull from.
That's great insight. Thank you, Sue. Let me ask a question that has come in from the audience for all of you. What can allies do to affect change we want to see? So maybe not a board member, someone in the business community, maybe someone near the academic community. Any thoughts there?
So I'll take a stab at it.
Please do.
Yeah, and when, you know, allies has broad definitions, but I will say the following. I think what you're seeing across the board now, you know, I'm involved in a bunch of different programs, if you'd like, because people are realizing the face of governance needs to change. It needs to represent our populace. It needs to be much more diverse than it currently is. So what's happening is, allies, a number of allies are those folks that are in leadership positions across the board. I'm involved at MIT with regards to women faculty are trying to help other women faculty to be able to step out and be on boards, although they're not business oriented. So they're trying to get them the kind of training to be able to approach business boards. The same thing at Mass General and Brigham's, which is, a hospital system, a clinical system, and very distinguished one. They've put together a diversity program in place also because they want to serve as a source of really qualified talent. And this came as an inspiration from the CEO, who she did not have this type of opportunity when she was coming up the ranks. So I think what you're seeing in allyship, if you like, are folks that this is not their primary responsibility, but see governance and see the ability to put women and underrepresented minorities into leadership roles, into boardship, into directorship roles. And therefore, they are really stepping up to either design programs or mentor or take the time to recommend people to go get mentored. It's become a question you ask because you're trying to bring people along with you. You might be the first, but never be the last. And I think more and more of that is happening, to be allies for others.
That's great. No, right at the model that Dennis spoke at the beginning. Dennis, I want to bring you back in on this question of creating an inclusive boardroom. Because you're putting in a lot of time and effort to help individuals prepare, and obviously you're as invested, maybe even more invested in their success. How do you think about the role and responsibility of the sitting director and the boards on which your alumni are serving?
So, the biggest opportunity for allyship in driving change in diversifying corporate boards are the people in the boardroom, to Sue's point, right? So understanding more broadly what platforms you have at your disposal that can help sort of drive the needle forward in DEI, I think is critically important. Sue talked a lot about what I consider to be process. I think there needs to be a critical evaluation of the slating and selection process, because the goal should be to maximize the talent pool reach, right? To ensure that you're doing everything that you possibly can to get the most talented people in the room. And oftentimes, I think what we're up against is, and Cynthia alluded to this earlier, is that for efficiency's sake, it's just a lot quicker, and in some cultural regards, maybe even safer, to go with people who are in the network of the folks already in the boardroom. So if you truly believe that better business outcomes come about as a result in part of having diverse board members, then it's my personal opinion that it should be seen almost as a fiduciary duty to ensure that you have a critical evaluation of that process that's maximizing your reach to potential talent. And I think just generally speaking, allyship in any regard, even if you're not in the boardroom, is you thinking about the platforms that you have at your disposal and how to use those to move the needle forward. In my case, being able to run executive education at a Catholic Jesuit Ignatian university that has a value system that speaks to social justice was a perfect opportunity for me to think about what I can use my platform for at Santa Clara to help drive the needle forward in DEI. So I would encourage everyone on this call, no matter if you're in the boardroom or not, to think about how do you do that? Because the biggest risk to the good work that has happened specifically since the murder of George Floyd is that this is going to become yet another moment in time. And it's going to be our collective responsibility to ensure that we're doing all that we can do to have this be a sustained effort, and that we're going to need to come together to do it.
And maybe if I could
Please,
jump in and offer just a couple of examples that have been meaningful to me. First, and I know that Sue and Dennis both talked about this, is the importance of access to networks. My first board role was because someone that I had interviewed with, she was considering me for a head of people role for, she works for a venture capital firm, one of their companies. Wasn't something I was interested in, but she kept letting me know, hey, you should talk to this person, or I think you might be good at this. So she actively got involved with my career and helping me connect to the right people. And eventually it led to an interview for the Torch opportunity. And the other thing that I would mention, and I saw a question from the audience, is around mentoring. I've been so fortunate that the boards that I've been on, the existing board members have reached out actively to have sessions with me, provide information, and actively be mentors without my even having to ask. So that mentoring, even in small pieces, is such an important way to be an ally that is really quite valuable.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. And please, audience, keep the questions coming. You know, Sue, you alluded to the court cases in California. I think, I'm going to say this, you feel free to correct me. I think we all feel pretty strongly that the trends here are clear. There's no putting the so-called genie back in this bottle. But there clearly are headwinds, pressures, you know, whatever metaphor you want to use. How is that impacting how your approach, your strategy to this work? Does it change anything for you? Do you think about engaging differently? Do you reframe the conversation sometimes? Maybe this is a quick question. I see not shaking heads. So, I mean, it's you know, to Dennis's point, the risk here is that this becomes just another moment in time. One of the questions from the audience was, do we think that boards are making meaningful progress here? And we've certainly seen the numbers go up.
Yeah, Marcel, I think it's an excellent question. And I don't think really, I don't think the headwinds are as strong as they were. In 2018, prior to the laws being put in place, you know, we had numbers that were something like 15% women on public boards. And now we're at 27% and 32% nationally, and then in California. So it gives you a sense in a 3-year time frame, we've done pretty well of really getting the numbers up. 4-year time frame overall. So the laws work, the mandates worked. What I will say is, I think now there is, and you opened up this panel with the notion of do the right thing. And I think what's happened is very much that. I think that leadership boards across the board see that boards need to represent the population. And we need to have diversity of thought, diversity of background. Cynthia talked about that at the beginning. We've seen a little bit of a slowdown because of the laws being stricken down. But I do believe that there is going to still, that the pressure will still remain from NASDAQ. If you're going to get listed on NASDAQ, you have to have a certain number of underrepresented minorities and women on your board. You're seeing that with the bankers like Goldman Sachs saying, I'm not going to take you public unless you have the right sort of diversity on your board. You're seeing it from investors, from BlackRock to State Street to Vanguard, putting the pressure in their votes at the time of the proxy season to be able to say, you'd better be well represented with regards to your diversity on your boards. So I think the continued external factors are still there, but I think the intrinsic desire now of folks that really believe in diversity, that want to do the right thing, as you said so clearly, is going to be there. It might have slowed down just a tad because people don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to be shamed into things, or they don't want to get penalized by being called out on a list. But they really, I believe, it's moving in the right direction. And I don't think, you said genie in the bottle, I say toothpaste in the tube. I don't think you can go backwards.
Marcel, if I could add, just to Sue's comment, you know, the other source of pressure are employees. I mentioned earlier about how the dynamics between employer and employees are changing, and employees feel greater agency, and they will be vocal. And so this is a topic that's coming up at companies where employees are asking, why isn't our board more diverse? And so that's another part, I think, of the equation in terms of setting expectations and also really understanding what it is that people are looking for and in some cases demanding.
Yeah.
Cynthia, that's wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to start to actually bring us to a close now. And Dennis, I'm going to start with a question to you, and then we'll sort of go around the horn. But Dennis, we have folks on the call listening that perhaps are saying, wow, I've never thought about it before, but maybe I should really explore this potential board path for myself. Perhaps there are board members on or other C-suite members that work closely with our board that are starting to think about how they can approach this work differently. You've got one rule here, which is you can't say individuals should join or call you and participate in the BCBR. But other than that, what's your advice to folks on this call in terms of next steps for them?
So I think any decision that we make in life to progress in any way has to come about in part from hard work and intention. So I think if you align yourself with the right people, the right programs, if you will, and opportunities, and continue to be intentional about what it is that you want to achieve. If you're not yet in the boardroom, and perhaps that's building up as an option for you, it takes time. One of the things we say in our program is, this is not guaranteed to a board seat. There's a lot of hard work that goes into ensuring that you're connecting in ways and taking advantage of opportunities that will lead to eventually a board seat. And so part of it is intention. So I don't know if that necessarily answers your question. I'd love to get thoughts from Cynthia and Sue on it, but I certainly know for myself that change is hard, and anything that we want in life takes a bit of work. And so you've got to be intentional about that.
I will definitely echo and reinforce your comment there. Doubly so probably if you want to serve on a board. That's a commitment and a half to make, both in terms of getting there and then serving. So I think that's very good advice. Sue, let me come to you next with that same question.
Well, I think Dennis put it well. I will also say the following, which is, if you want to get on a board and you are on a path now where you are in an operating role, a C-suite role, or on your way towards being on one, on your way to being on a C-suite role, be excellent at what you do first. and I know that sounds a bit like, duh, but let me tell you why I say that. To build your reputation of someone of excellence, you will get noticed. Networks will want to include you. People will seek your opinion, but you must be excellent and be intentional, like Dennis said, at what you do now. And then I would highly recommend start to ask people that sit on boards, just reach out to them and ask them, talk to me about what does it mean to sit on a board? What has worked for you? How did you get on your first board? And just have some questions ready. Reach out to them on LinkedIn, which a lot of people say, well, it doesn't necessarily work. You'd be surprised. And really start to do your homework. And then I would highly recommend find programs that you feel comfortable with to start getting some training with regards to the duty of boardship. What does it mean? What are the responsibilities? And then all the things that Cynthia had mentioned previously that Santa Clara University's program teaches, those mechanics, so that you understand what are you committing to once you get on a board. Get to know what that means for you so that you can be learned before you truly embark on saying, I'm ready, I want to go, please nominate me.
Sue, thank you. Cynthia, I'm going to give you the final word before we bring this to a close. Your advice on individuals perhaps looking to follow in your footsteps or boards that are looking to recruit you.
Yeah, actually, after really for prospective board members, after doing the research and understanding what it means to be on a board, and actually this piece of advice goes to both prospective board members, but also boards, articulate, vocalize your desire to bring diversity onto your board, different skills, different experiences, and express your interest to perhaps be on a board. You never know where these opportunities come from. Sometimes they come from places that you don't expect. And I would, also include talk to people at your current organization. My CEO was incredibly supportive of my desire to be on a board. And so you never know where opportunities may come if you just express your interest.
Well, that's outstanding. On behalf of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and NACD, I want to thank each of you, Cynthia, Sue, and Dennis, for sharing your experience today, and want to underscore what I tried to make clear at the outset, how impressive the program is, the impact it's having, the difference it's making. And so I hope we have more opportunities to highlight your good work and the good work of others over the course of all of our work. Because if we're going to ultimately have that impact, that scale, that the question suggested there around making progress here, we've got to all be working and pulling in the same direction. So I want to thank you for sharing your experiences today, and I hope we can keep this conversation going.
Marcel, if I can just jump in really quickly.
Please.
Before we part, Dr. Thane Kreiner, who I know is watching this panel, helped to pull us all together to have this discussion. And you talk about allyship. He's my co-founder for the Black Corporate Board Readiness Program. And it really takes networks, and a lot of that came from his own network when we launched. And so I just wanted to say thank you. So thank you for the time to step in and thank Thane.
No, absolutely, and that's a very appropriate recognition there, and I'll echo that as well. And on the part of NACD, trying to do similar work through our Center for Inclusive Governance and our NACD Accelerate program. So look forward to sharing in our successes together, sharing in the wins, and keeping this work moving forward. I know that in follow-up, the Chamber will be sending out the details about the Santa Clara program and where folks can get more information, and perhaps, Dennis, even your contact information for those board members that may want to reach out. And obviously, we'll share some information about the NACD and Chamber work as well. So with that, I want to thank all of you again for an incredibly rich and what frankly went by very quickly conversation. I'm going to bring our discussion to a close and turn it back over to our hosts at the Chamber. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Marcel.
Let me as well say thank you to Marcel and Cynthia, Dennis, and Sue for what was a rich, wonderful exchange. The guidance, the knowledge that you shared, to hopefully this audience that includes prospective board members. We heard the importance of preparation. We heard the importance of being intentional, community-based approach. We're all in this thing together. And the importance of networking. I grew up in rural South Carolina, and I often talk about diversity. I grew up fishing in small ponds. And I think as we think about that myth that there is not a lack of talent, it's just we got to build the networks. We got to go where the talent is. We got to fish in small ponds and medium ponds and big ponds. We got to use different bait. And so we are intentional at the U.S. Chamber. We're excited about this extraordinary partnership that we have with the National Association of Corporate Directors, the work that Santa Clara University is doing, and so many others out across America. I'm very optimistic that these are not just moments that as we've been focused on diversity and equity and inclusion, but that it really is a movement. As I've said before, diversity is not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. It's smart for our businesses, it's smart for our companies, it's smart for our country. And whether on Capitol Hill, whether in the C-suites, or in the boardroom, we at the U.S. Chamber, we're committed to continuing to champion the policies and practices for diversity and inclusion, to extend freedom and economic opportunity to all Americans. Thank you again for joining us for this wonderful conversation. We look forward to staying in touch. Thank you.